Let's take a look at the Tennessee Department of Education Curriculum Standards site. Here's the URL for that site. You can also use it by just Googling Tennessee Department of Education Curriculum, and the site will come up if you ever can't remember this long address. But it's state.tn.us/education/curriculum, and that will take you to this site. The first thing here is it will give you information about Tennessee moving to the Common Core, but we still use the state standards for our science and social studies. So we scroll down here, and I just want to point out one thing. They still list state standards for English language arts and math, but we no longer use these. We get those from the Common Core site, so don't make the mistake of coming to this site for your English or math standards. But what we do want to use on this site are the science standards and social studies standards, as well as health, wellness standards for those of you that are PE majors. So let's first take a look at science. Once you click on science, you will see a list of, for elementary science, all the grade levels, and they give it to you in either a PDF or a Word document. They're the exact same. It doesn't matter which one you choose. And then the high school or 9th through 12th grade science classes are listed below. So I want to point out one thing. State testing, or TCAPs, don't start until the 3rd grade. And so the 2nd grade and 3rd grade, you'll notice a difference between these earlier subjects, earlier grade levels and later grade levels. And I'll point out what I'm talking about in just a minute. But just keep in mind that TCAPs start in 3rd grade, the state testing, and so their standards have one more part to them. So let's look at an earlier grade level. Let's look at 2nd grade science. It opens a PDF. It gives you the main standard across the top. So grade 2, life science. Standard 1 is sales. And then under each standard are some guiding questions, a grade level expectation, often called a GLE, a check for understanding, and it gives you a place for a state performance indicator, or SPI. And if you'll notice, in the 2nd grade, the state performance indicator is blank all the way down. That's because the state performance indicator is what is tested on the TCAP, and since 2nd graders don't take TCAPs, they don't have state performance indicators, or SPIs. So what we need to look at in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, or pre-K are these grade level expectations and checks for understanding, and use them to write your learning objectives. And so, for instance, if we wanted to look at grade 2, standard number 3 is the flow of matter and energy. They get more specific as you move from left to right. So the grade level expectation is to recognize that animals eat plants or other animals for food. And then these are the 2 checks for understanding. These are the things that they could do to show you that they know that. So this column would probably be the most appropriate to use. This middle column, the checks for understanding, would be the most appropriate to use to show, to base your learning objectives on. They're going to describe the habitats of a particular organism based on its food, water, and air requirements. So you might write something like, given a particular organism, the student will describe its habitat based on food, water, and air requirements with 100% accuracy. Or the check for understanding for this next standard, heredity, it's the same thing. Sequence a collection of pictures or illustrations into correct stages of an organism's life cycle. So you would give them the organism, such as a butterfly, or, given a butterfly or a frog, the students would sequence the stages of the organism's life cycle in the correct order with, 100% accuracy. So that would be, this is the standard where you would get, the standard is standard for heredity, and then the check for understanding is how you would base your learning objective, because it's the most specific part of that standard. It breaks it down into what exactly they need to do to show that they understand heredity in the 2nd grade. So let's go back just a minute and I'll show you the difference between 2nd grade, and then let's move into 3rd grade. It looks just the same, except now they've added a state performance indicator. This is what's going to show up on the TCAP test. And so then you would use it, if it's goes most specific from left to right, you would use this far right one, which now is a state performance indicator to write your learning objective. But this is what they look like, the state standards for science. And then let's go back and look at social studies because it looks slightly different. In social studies here, you get to choose again your grade level or the high school history classes in social studies. But this time, instead of the nice left to right chart, it just goes up and down. So content standard 1 is culture. And it gives you, the large overarching standard. And then as you scroll down, it gets more specific. They have learning expectations, which is the same thing as the grade level expectation or GLE in science, and also an accomplishment. So you'll notice the vocabulary between science and social studies standards is a little bit different. But just like in science standards, where the most specific went from left to right, the most specific goes, up bottom to or top to bottom. And so you want to find the accomplishment would be what you would use to actually write your learning objective. So the standard 1 is culture, and under that, to write your learning objective, you would go down and find which accomplishment you want to focus on that day and use that accomplishment to write your learning objective. The same thing with, standard 3 is geography. It gives you the overarching standard, and then under that, some learning expectations and accomplishments. And it'll be easiest to write your learning objectives based on the accomplishments because they're the most specific thing. And then just like in science, let's go back and look at the difference between a second grade and third grade. It has the learning expectations and accomplishments. And then under that, the performance indicators. This is what's tested on the TCAP. So it even gets more specific at this point on what the students need to know. And you can then use these SPIs in order to write your learning objectives. They also add in the performance indicators for the teacher. These are the things that you could do as a teacher to help your students meet the SPIs. So you never want to use the TPIs, that's what teachers do, to write objectives. You always want to know what the students need to do, so use the SPIs. And then briefly, we'll look at what it looks like for health and wellness. So for technology, to integrate technology into these courses, when we look at health and wellness, we always want to choose our health topics and not the PE topics. Or if you want to teach high school, you can look at lifetime wellness. So choose health or wellness and not PE, because it's really hard to integrate technology into, say, shooting a basketball. And so, but these health and wellness topics, it's very easy to integrate technology and use technology to help with those topics. And so as you're working for IDT 3600 and you're a health or PE major, you'll want to choose either, if you're teaching the lower grades or through 8th grade, health, or high school, choose wellness. So let's just look at 3rd through 5th grade health. It gives you some information here. Then it gives you standard 1. So this is the state standard here, and then under it are those GLEs or learning expectations that are very specific. You can use these to write your learning objective. And then under it, there's performance indicators, so you can also use the performance indicators to write the learning objectives. And just like with social studies, there's things that teachers might want to do to help their students meet these goals. Never write your objective from what the teacher's going to do. Always write it for what the student will be able to do. So the student should be able to do these things in health or wellness class. So let's look, like standard 2 has to do with personal hygiene. The student will need to demonstrate the importance of personal hygiene practices. And then more specifically, the performance indicators. The students will describe basic personal hygiene methods, including hand washing, dental oral care, bathing, shampooing, and dressing. So that's what the student needs to be able to do. You would write your learning objective based on this part of the standard.